When you look at a massive suspension bridge, you don't really think about the daily wear and tear.
Right, you just assume it's a permanent fixture.
Exactly. You just trust that the thick steel cables and the concrete pillars are going to hold up against, well, the wind and the heavy traffic and just the relentless pull of gravity.
But structural engineers know that microscopic stress fractures are forming constantly. I mean, the elements are quietly testing the physical integrity of the whole structure every single second of the day.
And if a city waits until a main cable actually snaps to do maintenance, that's just a catastrophic failure of engineering. Yet we look at our own bodies and treat them exactly like those neglected bridges.
We really do.
We don't do the deep structural inspections until something visibly breaks, assuming that this progressive, steady collapse is just, an unavoidable part of getting older. So today, we are tearing down that flawed engineering model. Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive, where we're using a fascinating compilation called Foundations of Longevity, Science-Backed Protocols for Healthspan Optimization.
Yeah, and the overarching premise in these clinical trials and medical case studies, it completely reframes aging.
Complete.
Instead of a passive, inevitable downward slope, they provide a precise, proactive roadmap for maintaining the vascular, skeletal, and metabolic systems long before any cables snap.
Which is exactly what you want. And our goal with this deep dive isn't to overwhelm you with a laundry list of random biohacks. We want to extract the most potent, science-backed protocols that actually move the needle on health span.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the most immediate daily stress test our body faces, which is eating.
Oh, absolutely.
Because how we process fuel ultimately determines the integrity of our internal plumbing, like our blood vessels. And the first protocol seems remarkably minor. It's literally taking a 10-minute walk immediately after major meals.
But the timing is strictly enforced.
Right. Why is walking immediately after a meal so mechanically different than walking, say, 3 hours later? Well, it comes down to cellular mechanics in your skeletal muscle. When you walk right after a meal, the physical, mechanical squeezing of your leg muscles forces something called GLUT4 transporters to the surface of the muscle cells.
Wait, GLUT4, what are those?
Think of them as tiny cellular shuttles. The actual contractile activity physically pushes them to the cell membranes.
Oh, so they can start pulling glucose out of the blood right away.
Exactly.
Opening a side door for sugar to leave the bloodstream without having to wait in line for the insulin bouncer, basically.
That is a perfect analogy, yeah. Because relying entirely on massive surges of insulin to clear heavy glucose loads, well, it eventually burns out the system. We want insulin-independent glucose clearance.
Right, because insulin causes inflammation.
Yeah, chronic high levels of insulin and blood sugar act like sandpaper on the endothelial cells, which is the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels. By blunting those post-meal spikes mechanically, you prevent the systemic arterial inflammation that leads to atherogenesis or the formation of plaque.
To see the clinical reality of this, the case study of Dr. Jeremy London in the source material is just startling. I mean, he's a 57-year-old active cardiovascular surgeon.
Right, and he competes in iron distance triathlons.
Exactly. On paper, his outward fitness is elite, yet he suffered a major, unexpected cardiac event.
It's just a stark reminder that outward fitness does not automatically equate to metabolic health. His lab work revealed profound, silent insulin resistance.
Yeah, his numbers were alarming. His ApoB, which measures the concentration of plaque-building particles in the blood, was sitting at 180 milligrams per deciliter.
Wow, that is incredibly high.
And his fasting insulin was at 40 microinternational units per milliliter. The ideal fasting insulin is generally under 5. His system was just swimming in it.
Which is terrifying for a heart surgeon.
Seriously. So he started wearing a continuous glucose monitor to track his real-time responses, and he implemented these strict 10-minute post-meal walks, and it moved the needle drastically.
It really did.
He dropped his HbA1c, which is that 3-month receipt of your average blood sugar levels, from a pre-diabetic 5.7% down to a healthy 5.5%.
It just demonstrates the power of intercepting vascular damage at the source. But, if insulin resistance is quietly degrading the pipes, blood pressure is its partner in crime.
Oh, for sure.
It's the blunt force driving that degradation.
Yeah.
You cannot protect your vascular system if you're navigating with bad data, not just relying on a yearly checkup.
And that's where Dr. London's 722 home blood pressure protocol comes in. You take it for 7 days, twice daily, morning and evening, and you do 2 measurements each sitting to find the average.
What's fascinating here is how this specific cadence eliminates the noise of single-point testing. I mean, blood pressure is incredibly dynamic.
It changes by the minute.
Exactly. A single yearly reading at a clinic often triggers what they call white coat hypertension, where just the subtle stress of a medical environment artificially spikes your pressure.
Bro.
Or you get the opposite, masked hypertension, where you're relaxed in the clinic, but your daily baseline at home is dangerously elevated.
Wait, let me stop you there. If I strap a cuff to my arm 28 times in a single week, I feel like the sheer act of hyper-monitoring my health is going to induce the exact kind of anxiety that raises my blood pressure.
Well, yeah, that is a completely valid concern, and it's actually why the protocol is 7 days long. The first day or two, you might see an artificial elevation simply from the novelty of the cuff.
Ah, I see.
But by day 4 or 5, the brain habituates to the process. It becomes as mundane as brushing your teeth. That is when you capture the true diagnostic average of your systemic vascular resistance.
So bringing that comprehensive 7-day log to a physician allows them to intervene proactively. You prevent progressive vascular remodeling, stroke, and vascular dementia rather than waiting for a catastrophic event to react to.
Precisely. It's securing the supply lines.
But having perfectly clear plumbing doesn't mean much if the physical chassis those arteries feed is crumbling. The cardiovascular system is just the supply network. Now we have to look at the structural demand.
Right, building the armor.
Yes, through supervised high-intensity compound strength training. The recommendation calls for 30 minutes, twice weekly, of heavy lifts, like squats, deadlifts, overhead presses.
The focus is entirely on progressive overload, subjecting the skeletal system to mechanical loads that actually force adaptation.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. If you are a 65-year-old postmenopausal woman and you already have thinning bones, the standard medical advice for decades has been low-impact exercise.
Swimming, water aerobics, right?
Exactly. Keep it safe. Why are these clinical researchers telling that exact demographic to walk into a gym and lift heavy barbells?
It seems counterintuitive, I know, but the answer is a biological process called mechanotransduction. Your bones are not static concrete, they're living dynamic tissue.
So they need stress to grow.
Exactly. When you put a heavy compressive load on your skeleton during, say, a deadlift, you actually deform the bone matrix on a microscopic level.
And that physical deformation is the trigger.
Yes. There are cells embedded deep inside the bone called osteocytes. They act as mechanical sensors. When the bone bends slightly under a heavy load, it shifts the fluid pressure around these osteocytes.
Oh, wow.
That fluid shear stress is the biological signal that wakes up osteoblasts, which are the cells responsible for laying down new bone mineral.
Which explains why swimming doesn't build bone.
Right. Low-impact exercises like swimming have massive cardiovascular benefits, but because you are buoyant, there is zero fluid shear stress in the bones. The osteoblasts remain completely dormant.
The data on this from the 2018 Lift More clinical trial is incredible. Researcher Belinda Beck led this, and they specifically recruited postmenopausal women with an average age of 65 who were already diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis.
Right, the exact population you'd think should avoid heavy lifting.
Exactly. The control group did standard, low-intensity home exercises, and their bone density just continued to decline. But the high-intensity compound lifting group achieved significant, measurable increases in bone mineral density in both their hips and spines.
And they improved their balance, too.
They did. Incredibly, some even increased their physical height as their spinal columns fortified. And perhaps most importantly, there were zero adverse events.
Because the loading was supervised and incrementally progressive, this structural armor is just non-negotiable for longevity.
Yeah, Dr. Tina Moore, one of the clinical experts cited, highlights gluteal strength as a primary marker for vitality. When she examines a patient with inverted or flat glutes, she notes it's a massive red flag indicating severe physical deconditioning and a highly elevated fall risk.
Rebuilding that baseline power halts the slide into frailty.
Right.
But building the muscle tissue is really only one side of the equation.
Because of the wiring, right.
Right. We also have to preserve the neurological hardware that actually fires those muscles.
And the protocol here is sprints for NMJ preservation. Cynthia Martellian, who is a master's level decathlete, recommends 10 to 20 meter max effort grass sprints 3 times a week.
The biological target here is the neuromuscular junction, or NMJ. These are the highly specialized biological bridges where a motor neuron physically connects to a muscle fiber.
So it's the literal wiring.
Exactly. After the age of 60, if these junctions aren't subjected to high velocity demands, they naturally decay. The nerves literally detach from the muscle fibers.
But telling an older person with no sprinting background to go do max effort sprints on a field sounds like a recipe for a torn hamstring or worse, a blown Achilles.
Which is why the principle of max effort doesn't have to mean Olympic sprinting. It means maximal neurological recruitment relative to the individual's capacity.
So what's the safer alternative?
For someone older or deconditioned, the safer protocol is a 30-second uphill walk. Martellian's own 82-year-old father preserved his fast-twitch motor pathways by doing hill walk intervals in his driveway.
Because walking up a steep incline forces the foot into dorsiflexion, right? Which safely loads the tendons and builds joint stability.
Right. And he supplemented this with polyquin step-ups. Those are heel-elevated stepping movements that specifically target the vastus medialis oblique.
The teardrop muscle right above the knee.
Yes, exactly. Doing that helps maintain exceptional motor control.
So by forcing the body to recruit those high-threshold fast-twitch fibers, you blast a signal to the central nervous system, demanding that it keep those balance pathways alive. You're building reaction time to catch yourself before a hip fracture ever happens.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're building bone density and preserving the neurological wiring. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when people try to get healthier and lose weight, the body often fights back. Why is it so hard to keep weight off once you lose it?
It's because your body relies on an autonomous weight-sensing regulatory system called the gravitostat. It's a very ancient evolutionary survival mechanism.
I need to understand the mechanics of this. How does the body actually weigh itself?
Think of the gravitostat like the thermostat in your house. But instead of sensing temperature, it senses physical load. We go back to those osteocytes, the mechanical sensors in your weight-bearing bones.
The same ones we wake up when we lift heavy.
Exactly. When you lose body fat, your physical mass drops. The osteocytes detect that the mechanical load and fluid pressure in your legs have suddenly decreased.
So the body panics.
Evolutionarily, sudden weight loss meant you were starving. So the gravitostat signals the brain to dramatically throttle down your resting metabolic rate. It forces your body to burn fewer calories just to stay alive, making it incredibly easy to regain the fat.
But the protocol to bypass this is weighted rucking, right?
Right.
Wearing a weighted vest or a heavy backpack during a low-intensity walk.
Yes. You are literally tricking the osteocytes. By adding external weight back onto your frame, the gravitostat senses the physical load and assumes the body hasn't lost any mass at all.
The clinical evidence validating this mechanism is remarkable. The International Journal of Obesity published a study tracking subjects on a calorie-restricted diet.
This is such a great study.
Yeah, the control group saw their resting metabolic rate plummet by 250 calories per day as the gravitostat panicked. But the group that wore a weighted vest matching the exact amount of weight they had lost, their resting metabolic rate dropped by only 16 calories a day.
That is an astonishing difference. 16 calories versus 250. It completely prevents weight regain.
And author Michael Easter observed this phenomenon in the field with backcountry hunters in Alaska. These individuals are hiking through brutal terrain carrying massive loads. Because of the environment, they are in steep caloric deficits.
But clinical tracking showed they lost exclusively fat mass.
Exactly. Zero muscle. The Rucking signaled their biology to preserve every ounce of metabolically active muscle despite the caloric scarcity.
It is amazing. But, all these physical interventions, the heavy deadlifts, the post-meal walks, the sprinting, the digesting, they're all completely useless if the body's internal environment is trapped in a state of chronic stress and poor recovery.
Right. If your biological software is constantly panicking, the hardware won't adapt.
Exactly. Chronic psychological stress traps the nervous system in sympathetic dominance. Your breathing is shallow, cortisol is elevated, and your body basically believes a physical predator is present.
A constant state of alarm.
Yes, you cannot build bone or repair endothelial cells when the body thinks it's about to be eaten.
The protocol to break that loop is somatic sensory anchoring. When you experience chronic stress, you actively redirect your focus away from anxious looping thoughts and concentrate intensely on the precise physical textures of a neutral external object.
Right.
It's like hitting the manual override switch on a blaring fire alarm in your brain by intensely focusing on the physical texture of the alarm box itself. But how does touching a texture actually stop a panic response?
It's about rerouting blood flow and electrical activity. When you are in a panic state, the amygdala, the brain's threat monitoring center, is hyperactive. By forcing deep tactile focus onto a safe physical sensation, you demand that the brain process complex sensory data.
Oh, so it distracts the brain.
More than distracts. It forces electrical activity and blood flow away from the limbic system and up into the prefrontal cortex and somatic sensory networks. You create physical spaciousness. You're using a cortical override to physically shut down the fight-or-flight circuit.
Journalist Dan Harris details a fascinating application of this in the sources. He struggled with severe anxiety and worked with a practitioner named Johanna Franzel. Her protocol for him was to focus intensely on the generous belly of his overweight cat, Ozzy.
The sensory detail is what demands that cortical processing.
Yeah, he focused on the softness of the fur, the rise and fall of the breathing, the physical weight of the animal. It instantly shifted neurological activity from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex.
And tying this to longevity, managing that acute stress response is vital because sympathetic dominance raises cortisol, which damages the exact vascular endothelium we were trying to protect earlier with those post-meal walks.
So once we manage the acute daily stress, we have to look at setting the overarching biological clock to ensure deep restorative sleep. The protocol for this is daytime light amplitude, getting outside for 10 to 20 minutes of outdoor sunlight within the first hour of waking up.
Because this creates a stark biological contrast. Morning light hits intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells in your eyes.
Which project right to the clock in your brain.
Exactly, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This sensitizes D2 and D3 dopamine receptors and creates a stark amplitude that optimizes melatonin 16 hours later.
Rowan Jacobson took this to the extreme to cure his severe middle-aged insomnia. He initiated the Sonoran Desert experiment, basically living in an Airstream trailer with zero artificial light at night.
Right, the contrast there is massive.
And it significantly reduced markers of DNA damage, specifically 8-oxo-DG, and lowered inflammation markers like IL-6.
That deep sleep architecture is critical because it drives lymphatic clearance. During deep sleep, you are basically washing away the neurotoxic aggregates linked to Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, living in an Airstream in the desert sounds incredibly restorative. But for the listener driving in the dark to an office job in a rainy city, how do they replicate that amplitude?
It requires intention. Even on an overcast day, the measurement of light intensity outside is vastly higher than indoor office lighting. Stepping outside for 15 minutes or using a specialized 10,000 lux therapy lamp at your desk creates enough of a signal to anchor the clock.
It's an actual physical washing machine for the brain. Okay, so we've covered the structural armor, the vascular plumbing, the circadian clocks, but there is one final piece, the ultimate master regulator of everything we've discussed today, hormones.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, hormones are the master regulators of everything from vascular flexibility to bone density and sleep architecture. Receptors for estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone exist in every single organ.
And the protocol advocated by experts like Dr. Kelly Casperson and Dr. Rachel Rubin is bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. They argue against just accepting lab results as normal for your age if those normal levels are causing a catastrophic decline.
Right. For women, the target is working with specialists to maintain an estradiol level around 100 picograms per milliliter because systemic estrogen is deeply protective.
The case of Maria Emmerich's client, Linda, illustrates how life-changing this is. Linda was a carnivore. She hit her protein goals easily, but she developed unexplained iron deficiency and muscle loss post-menopause, and her doctors dismissed her flatlined estrogen as normal.
But average does not mean optimal. When Linda was placed on bioidentical testosterone and estrogen, it completely restored her lean mass and resolved her pain. The hormones provided the necessary signal for her body to actually use the protein she was eating.
The experts also emphasize the critical nature of local vaginal estrogen, right?
Absolutely. It prevents mucosal thinning, which directly protects against recurrent UTIs and fatal urosepsis. It's a life-saving intervention for older women.
So, what does this all mean? It means that true longevity isn't about hoping for good genetics. It is about actively managing the system. You manage the engine with post-meal walks.
You track the pressure with the 722 protocol.
Exactly. You build the armor with heavy lifting and rucking and set the internal master clocks with light, stress anchors, and optimal hormones.
It leaves us with a paradigm-shifting question to ponder. What if what we commonly call aging isn't an inevitable natural decay of the human body, but simply the result of chronically understimulating our biological survival mechanisms?
We let our gravitostat, our neuromuscular junctions, and our osteoblasts go dormant from a lack of use. We let the bridge rust because we stop driving heavy trucks over it. Don't let your biological mechanisms go dormant. Step outside tomorrow morning, get that morning sunlight, and start sending the right signals to your body. You have the protocols, now it's time to use them.